Hey everyone, in this video I'll be showing you the best magic party build in Divinity Original Sin 2. I'll be showing you 4 different builds here that are very synergetic between each other. With a Geomancer Pyrokinetic spellcaster, we also have a Summoner, which is really powerful and it focuses on a bit of utility as well. We also got another Firecaster with a bit of Scoundrel that's focused on targets that don't have physical armor for crowd control. And then our main crowd controller, which is going to be an Aerotheurge Hydrosophist build here for Lohse. So first off, I'm just going to talk about a bit of the combat and how you're going to go about it. Since we have someone that's going to be focusing on water spells and 2 that are focusing on fire here, we kind of want to split things. But one of the nice things is if you have a character that has the contamination spell, you can turn water into poison, which if there's fire nearby, it'll end up exploding. And with things like elemental affinity, making it cheaper to cast certain spells, I like to have one that has a little bit of warfare here because you can drive down, drop a fire surface on your fire casters, and then they're going to have a cheaper cost for their spells. Well, typically we're going to be dealing magic damage. It is nice, again, if there's a target without any physical armor to be able to crowd control them with Battle Stomp and Battering Ram. And since Sebille here is an elf, she's got the Flesh Sacrifice, which then lets her use Last Rites, Shackles of Pain, and Living on the Edge here, which is going to have a cheaper cost because we create a blood surface. And with Living on the Edge, we can make it so that we don't go down for 2 turns, and then we can cast Last Rites to revive one of our teammates with maximum vitality by dealing damage to us, and we can then use Shackles of Pain to deal that entire damage to another target. And you can do that easily with the Flesh Sacrifice, giving you 5 action points. And for example, I was able to strip the physical armor, so we got 1 target crowd controlled here. Now with our Aero Hydro build, we can set up rain in a different area. And what's great about this is whenever we set up the water, it's going to show invisible targets, but then you can have someone be able to turn it into poison and explode it. Then we can move into our water surface here to get cheaper spells where we can do a little bit of damage and set up ice surfaces and use things like Winter Blast here. And for our Summoner, they have an Incarnate. It's honestly very powerful. Depending on if there's a fire surface nearby, you can use that, or you can do an ice one, you can do a water one. Your choice there. I typically prefer the fire one, just depends what you got in your turn there. And I like to have them next to the enemy so they can do melee attacks. And we're going to be buffing them up on our next turn, but we also have the elemental totems here, which we can use to set up, and we want to be using these every turn. Summoning being great because if you need someone to do a bit of extra healing, you can summon in that water one there that has restoration. Otherwise, you can just get it to do normal attacks here, which are going to deal water damage, and you can see it actually hits quite hard. Then my favorite build, the Geomancer Pyrokinetic here. Worm Tremor with the Torturer talent is crazy because you can drop this down and hold enemies in place. So you can actually get this off on 3 targets at a time. It's actually pretty crazy because they're now entangled and stuck in place, so we control the battlefield this way. We also have Contamination, which is great because then you can turn any water into poison here, which is great if you're playing an undead. It will hurt your teammates, so just be mindful of that, but it's great if you want to set up more fire because this will all explode. And since Sebille is still on a fire surface, we can use this to explode all the poison here and also hit 3 targets for 2 action point costs, which is pretty effective. And we can use Firewhip to be able to blind this target right here with a pretty good amount of damage. And since this target doesn't have physical armor, it's nice to also then apply Shackles of Pain, so if you get hurt, they are going to take damage too. And we have Flesh Sacrifice to make that a reality. And back to our Hydra skills here. Ice is great because you can chill and also then freeze. You can see there we got a target frozen, so they lose their turn, which is great. We want to crowd control with our Hydrosophist and skills whenever possible. If you can stun them, that's great too. We also have movements like Nether Swap and Teleport that we can do, and if the team needs heals, we also got that, and we can restore shield as well. I'm going to try and jolt this target here, so yeah, we got him shocked. And for our Summoner on their second turn, it's best to be able to set up with their totems and then go ahead with some of the buffs here. The Power Infusion on their summon being the #1 priority here because it's going to give them extra damage and a useful skill. And then the other one I would recommend using is the Farsight Infusement unless you want to buff up your team. Everyone's got a bit of support that they can provide for everyone, so it depends on what your turns need. And the best part is since we created poison surfaces there, we now have fire underneath our feet, so our character here is going to be able to do Fireball for 1 action point cost. Pretty nice. It's going to further explode everything there, and Spontaneous Combustion gives you some pretty effective damage there. We can further explode things. Then we also have Searing Daggers, which is quite nice. We need to finish off targets. When our Incarnate gets a range attack, this is really nice because they can help pick away at enemies. If there's someone closer, they could attack. And then we have very powerful sword skills here if we want to shock and take enemies out just like that. And these builds honestly synergize well together, allowing you to take out targets, crowd control, and stay safe. So for our first build, this is the Geomancer Pyrokinetic. It's mainly going to be damage focused, and it's great at crowd control too, without having to strip any armor to be able to lock enemies in place. Now for our attributes, since this is damage focused, we're going to be focusing mainly on our intelligence here. This is going to be the first stat you increase, bringing your memory up as you get more books throughout the game. I have roughly around 19 memory right here, and I found that was good enough to get all the spells that I want with cooldowns. I have 1 point into the wits here. It's not required. You can put another point in memory if you want to prepare someone else. I think at around level 13, that 30 intelligence, 20 memory works well. Into our abilities. Now, we're obviously going to be going into Pyrokinetic. This is our main damage skill, so we want this as high as possible. Geomancer is great too because this is going to give us more physical armor as well, and it just increases the damage we're dealing, though that's not really the main intention here. I also have 1 point into Warfare here so you can get the Executioner feat since we deal so much damage, and getting 2 points of Warfare then lets us set up Fire Surfaces, which is great because then we can use that for mobility, and also we can drop Poison Clouds down and make them into fire real quick. I also have a couple points in Necromancer from gear, which I find is nice for a bit of sustain, and that's going to be mostly what we focus on as the pyrokinetic based skills. And if you're playing with Fane, have them as a thievery because they're going to have the bony finger to open up any locks. Now for our talents, this is where it's important. I like to have Pet Pal in the main character, but a normal setup for talents would be the Elemental Affinity here, which lowers your action point cost by 1. We basically want to set this up as often as possible because casting cheaper fire spells is really important. This lets us do 2 of our more powerful ones with a 4 action point cost versus 6. Fire Out Man is a great talent because this lets you attack at an increased range. Sometimes this is just nice to be able to cast Fireball a little bit further, so useful skill, not fully required. I do like having Hothead here as when we're at full vitality, which a little bit Necromancer will help us out with. We get a 10% critical hit chance and 10% more accuracy. And that crit rate's important because the Savage Sortilege will then add that crit rate onto our spells. And you can see it's actually very devastating if you can land some crit spells in a row. Very powerful. The most essential talent here, other than the Elemental Affinity, is the Torturer. So certain statuses that are normally blocked by magical physical armor will not be blocked so that we can apply things like Burning, which is great, and Poisoned. The big one though is Worm Tremor, that Geomancer spell which can lock enemies in place. Being able to do that at the start of combat, especially if there's melee targets, we're going to be laughing. I also want to mention you can drop one of your wands and only use one, and then have your offhand free to use something like Ambidextrous, or have a staff even. A staff counts for this. So yeah, if you use a staff, you can pop this and get scrolls, and then you can load up on some of the more powerful ones and blast away with them. And also grenades are nice for setting up surfaces. So for our skills now, the Pyrokinetic ones are going to be damage focused, and Geomancer are kind of focused more so on the crowd control options. Now, one of our staple spells here is Fossil Strike, creating an oil surface wherever it lands. We can then chain that into fire. I also like Earthquake, which will create oil surfaces everywhere, kind of similar concept. Impalement's similar to Impalement, and Fossil Strike are kind of ones that we're going to be using often. This can also cripple targets, which is really great, but they have physical armor up, they won't get hit by this. As mentioned though, Worm Tremor is a main stat spell that we want to have here because this will drop everyone and keep them in place for 3 whole turns. With the Torture feat, it bypass the magical armor, so they also cannot teleport. They're stuck there, which is really good because then if there's a lot of enemies in one spot, you can continually drop things like Fireball on them. I also like to have Fortify for a bit of physical armor. This removes poison, bleeding, burning, acid, and decaying, so this can help out with those if you have it. Contamination, as mentioned, is also nice because this will turn water into poison and blood also into poison, which we can explode if there's fire nearby. Very useful, but chaotic. And then Poison Dart's great because it'll create a poison puddle, and if you're paying as Fane, you're going to heal yourself with this. Now for our Pyro skills, Ignition is a very powerful one which will do fire and ignite any surfaces, so you can chain Contamination into that for a 2 action point and create a bunch of fire, and then you can walk into fire and then get Fireball for cheap. The Pawn is another talent that's kind of nice because you can then use Phoenix Dive and walk into it to get yourself cheap fire spells. Entirely your choice. I like to have my other teammates focus on that. Since we do so much damage, we can get the Executioner off sometimes more freely if you wanted to use the Executioner. Now, the Searing Daggers is also a nice choice here, which will create fire surfaces. And yeah, I should have mentioned there the Executioner feat, giving 2 extra action points when you take out a target. However, it's also alright to spec in the Scoundrel for that same reason, to then take the Pawn, because this lets us walk into the fire spells a little bit more freely. And that can also, if we have 2 Huntsmen, we can take Mass Deploy Traps too. This is another really good Pyro skill. It does a crazy amount of damage, and this will allow us to throw traps, and they're basically fireballs. It's actually kind of nuts. But I also put a couple more points into memory because there's actually another combo here that I do like to take with the Shackles of Pain, and if we have enough of the Necromancer level 3, we can take Last Rites to be able to revive a target, but Living on the Edge is just really good alongside Shackles of Pain because you can walk into a blood surface, and then for 3 action points, you can basically be a punching bag and be able to take down enemies that way. But back to our fire spells, we also got Laser Ray here for a lot of fire damage in a large area. It's a straight line, it'll hit targets from top down, which is amazing. Fireball, enough said, it's a powerful spell, burning for 3 turns, 1 action point cost if there's fire. I also got Peace of Mind here, which increased our stats by 3 and wits by 7. This is really nice. If you're charmed or taunted, frightened, blinded, it'll remove that, so you can also use it on your teammates. And if they're mad, it's super useful too to stop that. Spontaneous Combustion is probably the most damage-friendly spell that we got here that's not a source skill, because this will remove any of the burning and necrofire and deal extra damage, which is actually pretty effective here. And also for our source skills, I have the Epidemic of Fire, which is like a chained fire attack, dealing a ton of damage and leaving behind Cursed Fire. And as mentioned, the mass deploy traps, or deploy mass traps, which is very powerful. You do need 2 huntsmen, which also gets you tactical retreat if you don't want to have the fire version of that. I also like to have bless on here, but don't bless cursed target or cursed fire. It'll turn it back to normal fire. And as mentioned, if you can get 3 necromancer last rites, I like to have those 3 on anyone for the utility that they bring. And since we're going to get cheaper spells, we can set that up pretty quick. And poison wave is another good spell if you're playing as Fane. Now, typically for gear, we're going to be prioritizing pyrokinetic based skills and crit rates. We got a 34% crit chance here, and I think that's pretty solid. You want to get obviously Geomancer as well, but pyrokinetic number 1. Wits is another important stat if you can find on your gear, but I'd prefer intelligence until we get later on in the game. And as mentioned, you can use a staff and then use the ambidextrous talent to throw grenades and use scrolls cheaper. And next up is our crowd controller, and this is also kind of a damage support healer. It does a lot of roles. It's one of the best builds in the game, and this is perfect for Lohse here. So this is going to be another intelligence-based build, so put all your points into that. We do need a bit memory here, so you can put a few more points. So I got 30 intelligence and 19 memory here. Now for our ability scores, we're going to be mostly focused on the Hydrosophist. Aerotheurge has higher damage from these two, so if you can get one to be a little bit higher, Aerotheurge is a little bit better, and Hydrosophist is just good for this healing spells. And while the spells are nice, they aren't as damaging as pyrokinetic based skills, which is, it's something to keep in mind. I also have the warfare skill there. This is just to get the executioner, although you can go with the pawn. I like to have at least 2 characters with the executioner and 2 with the pawn. It's typically how I like to roll about it. But yeah, going with these 2 skills is important, and then putting either the last point in the warfare or in the Scoundrel if you want to grab the pawn. This is another build where the elemental affinity shines because we can set up water surfaces like you saw at the start, and then cast some of our cold spells a little bit better. Executioner is important just because if you can take out a target, and we got lots of large area effect spells, we can get that 2 extra action points back to do a bit more damage or crowd control. I also like the Fire Out Man. This is good because you can kind of kite enemies. You can have your whole team kind of run with you if you wanted to. But with Fire Out Man, this lets you hit some crowd control spells from farther range, which I think is important. Hothead's great. This is one of the first ones I'd probably drop because it gives you 10% crit chance when you full vitality. We do heal ourselves pretty good, but just something to keep in mind. Sometimes you're not going to get this if you don't have necromancer skills. And the Savage Sortilege, which will add the crit chance that we got onto all of her spells. Again, this is another build where the ambidextrous is a nice choice to go with. Even Comeback Kid can be okay to be able to bounce yourself back if you were to go down. And 5-star Diner is also nice because this will double the effects of some of our options, which is really nice to have. Now our spells here are mostly split between Aero and Hydro. Uncanny Evasion, it's nice. You can basically make someone not get hit. This is good if there's a teammate of yours that's about to go down. You can protect them quickly for 1 action point, and it has a 15-meter range. Now, we also got things like our Pressure Spike here. It says Condense All Clouds. It doesn't really matter. You can do it with anyone. 1 action point, air damage, and it's pretty nice. Now, we also got some mobility here with Nether Swap, which lets you and someone else swap places if you wanted to, or you can move 2 characters around. This is good for getting high ground. If there's a target that has it, you can steal it from them and put them in down by your team. Also, things like Teleport are pretty nice. You can teleport targets off of ledges. You can teleport sharks out of water. There's a lot of cool ways to use teleportation. Also like to have Electric Discharge for a bit of ranged air damage and can set shocked on the enemy. And Vacuum Touch can do suffocation and silence on the target. Although if you're running with this, it's probably better to have the pawn so you can get into close range. We also have Closed Circuit here, which is a 2 source point cost, huge damage, and creates Cursed Static on clouds on the edge of the surfaces and makes immunity to air for you for 1 turn. Pretty effective, high damage spell. Chain Lightning, also very powerful. If there's a lot of enemies, it'll fork up to 8 times in an 8-meter radius and deal a good amount of damage and set shock for 2 turns. These are both nuke spells. They're very powerful. Now, as far as our cold and our Hydrosophist spells go, Global Cooling, which will freeze all suspectable target or surfaces, which can be pretty useful. Be mindful of when you're setting up water, because we can either turn it into poison and then explode into fire, or we can turn it into ice and make the enemy slip. Just depends what the team calls for. Also check the enemy's resistances. Sometimes it's going to be better to do a certain thing a different way. Rain is a good one though, because this will set wet for a turn. Be mindful though again that if you have fire in that area, it's going to douse that, so that's why you kind of have to split the battlefield, but it's a fun way to play. Now we also have things like Winter Blast, which will also freeze blood and water surfaces and deal chilled and water damage. Pretty effective. Ice Fan here, which can target 3 positions and will also mark targets as chilled. And then the Hail Strike, which will also set chilled now. And the thing is, if you got chilled on an enemy and you chill them again, it freezes them. Or if you put water on them, it freezes them. Hail Strike is crazy because it'll do 3 in a circular area. And if you can hit the enemy with all 3 and they don't have magic armor, you freeze them. It's pretty nuts, actually. We also have things like the healing ritual here, which will do a bit of healing and chain to nearby enemy allies. If you're in water, it's going to be cheaper. I also like the restoration here, which will heal one target for 2 turns, and it can remove poison and bleeding. Soothing Cold is also nice because it'll allow you to regenerate magic armor for all your teammates. I like to have all these cold-based spells here too, and also another one that's pretty effective if you have the Scoundrel is Vampiric Hunger, because this can give 50% lifesteal, which is sometimes enough just to be able to sustain someone to be able to get back into a fight. And Superconductor is another fun spell to go with here. There's actually quite a few decent ones. Even the Blinding Radiance can be good, but I like to roll with the following here. Maddening Song can be okay, because if we're able to remove their armor magically, we can then use this, but it has a 1 source point cost. Not always the best option. And for gear, we got a 37% crit rate. This is from a staff here that was able to get that. Actually pairs very well with this. And you're looking again for Hydrosophist and Aerotheurge, with Aerotheurge being the highest priority that you can find. I had to boost some stats here to be able to equip this, but yeah, use what you can get. Now next is a summoning build for Ifan here. Now, if you don't like summoning builds in other games, you might actually like it in this game. It's very powerful and actually fun to play due to how the action point economy works in this game. So with this, we can actually focus on Constitution. The reason being is that summoning doesn't scale off our intelligence, and we're also going to use some Hydrosophist because the healing doesn't scale off of our intelligence. So we can go all in our Constitution. I know this isn't very great. If you're in the late game, it can be a bit more challenging in like honor mode, but it actually works on this setup. And then that lets us put more points into memory so we can prepare a lot of different utility-based spells. So actually Constitution works decently well here. Now, I also like to have some points into Necromancer so that we have sustain, because we have health, we may as well make the most of it. Hydrosophist does give us mostly just the healing spells, and then most of our points are going in summoning. For a summoner build, this gives our summons 160% more vitality, health, physical damage, and magical armor. They actually hit very hard, so get this up as high as possible, as quickly as possible. And for our talents, you can use the Elemental Affinity here. It's going to be less as impactful as the other builds, but still a good one because we can set up water surfaces really easily and use some of our Hydrosophist skills for cheap. Far Out Man, it's just an amazing spell because this increases our range, and this lets us place totems even further away, which is amazing. Hothead will give us even further crit rate, which is not necessary. We can actually live without this. And we can actually live without a critical hit chance too. Living Armor, though, is one that we want. It takes all the healing that we get and applies it to our magic armor. Now, I have a shield on, but you could use a staff and go with the ambidextrous here to be able to cast or use scrolls and grenades cheaper. 5-star Diner is actually one that I would recommend here because we can do some funny things with Soulmate and heal ourselves. Soulmate's a summoning spell. If we get double the effects of food, it's going to heal us a ton and then heal our teammates actually quite a bit. So this is one that's actually kind of cool. And if you get any potions of resistance, you can sometimes end up getting a crazy amount of resistance from them. Mnemonics pretty good pretty early on because this gives you 3 extra memory points, which is pretty nice. Morning Person is not a bad option either to resurrect to full health if you go down often, which Comeback Kid can prevent. But since we don't care too much about our crit rate, it's actually kind of best to go with the Mnemonic or even go with the Bigger and Better for 2 extra attribute points, or all skilled up for an extra combat ability point. Like those probably be the best because we actually have a lot of skills here that are super they all help our summoning here. So I guess I'll first start off the Necromancers. The same idea as the others with having the Living on the Edge. Which is kind of the whole reason that we have the Elemental Affinity, which lets us do Last Rites and Living on the Edge for 2 action point costs, and then have Shackles of Pain on a target. Crazy synergy, very powerful. Now, we also got things like Tactical Retreat, depending on what your gear is. I got 2 Huntsmen, so this gives us haste and a teleport, which is nice on this build to set up with. I also have the actual haste spell here, which is nice from Pyrokinetic, and the Phoenix Dive here. This is just based on gear. Phoenix Dive being a really nice spell because again, it creates fire surfaces so we can pop to a high ground and then set down our totem on fire. It's kind of cool. Now for our Hydrosophist skills, we got Healing Ritual for the healing wave, same as Restoration there. Cleanse Wounds can actually be good for removing burning, disease, decaying. If we want to heal someone quickly, it'll create a water puddle, so it's a heads up on that. Soothing Cold will give us magical armor over turns, which is nice for a 1 action point cost to give a bit of sustain. Arcane Stitch is kind of crazy, giving a full magic armor. If you have someone on your team that's got magic armor, this is good. I also like to have for our source skills to have the Summon Inner Demon. This gives you magic armor and some special attacks to crowd control with. It's more so like a get out of jail free card to give you extra magic armor. We also have Summon Ifan Soul Wolf now. This is normally not great, but on this build, it gets 160% extra health, so it's a little bit better. And the whole thing it does is it howls, so it's actually going to be a tanky one, which is good in a pinch. If our Incarnate goes down, you can pop this up and it's going to be okay. It's not amazing. The Incarnate is much better. We want to get our summoning up to level 10 as soon as possible because then we can get a champion version of it. And then we can use, in this order, is the best. The Power Infusement I typically go with first, increases physical armor and give it the Whirlwind attack and rush. which lets it do a knockdown, which is actually pretty crazy. Then the next choice is to go with the Fireside Infusement, which will give it more magic armor and increases damage by 25% again, and it gives it a ranged attack, which is quite powerful. We're then going to take either the Warp or the Shadow Infusement. These are only if you had the memory to be able to supply it. They're pretty fun. Now, the one that I think is actually insane is Soulmate. So this lets you bind to a target or character, copying any healing and armor restoration you receive to them, and it'll get rid of frozen, stun, knockdown, and petrified. So if you have a teammate that gets hit with knockdown, pop Soulmate on them, and then heal and restore your magic armor. It's going to give that all to your team. And since we restore our magic armor with our talent, we can actually apply that to our team as well. And furthermore to this, there's a very tough fight in Act 2, the Allison fight. Basically, you can use Soulmate on it and then start chugging potions, and it's going to take a crazy amount of damage. And if you have the 5-star Diner, it doubles the damage. It gets actually insane. So this is an underrated summoning skill that I think is really great. You can also put it on pretty much anyone, so it's good. Now our regular flow is to summon the Incarnate, summon in the Elemental Totem, and you're going to be doing these every single turn. The Bone Widow is an okay choice too if you have the Necromancer. It's a physical damage, so it's not as good, and same thing with the Soul Wolf. So these are our backups if the Incarnate goes down. So if you don't want to use the Soul Wolf or you're using someone else, you can then use a Bone Widow. It'll be just as fine. But you don't have to worry about the Phoenix Dive, Haste, or Tactical Retreat. These are just because I have the stats for them. Although I do like Phoenix Dive to have a Fire Totem and Fire Incarnate at a 1 action point cost. And for this build, I actually like to have a shield here. Now we have 1300 health, which is crazy because our teammates have like 500. So this is again on Tactician. So honestly quite tanky, and we have 800 magic armor. So yeah, you typically want to have like a high amount of shield just to protect ourselves from the crowd control. And the gear we're looking for is mostly going to be summoning. Like if you can get a +2 summoning on your gear, that's ideal rolls. And then a few Hydrosophists as well, and actually getting increases in health is oddly enough good on this build, with Constitution being the top priority. So as far as combat goes, we have, again, for Sebille here, this is the interesting build. We're going to be speccing into Intelligence still, a bit of memory, and this is a utility all-in-one type character, because while we have a full magic-based team, there are going to be some enemies where it's just best for us to go with a little bit of physical damage. So for this setup, it's mostly going to be Pyrokinetic. This is going to have 12. This is actually like one of the highest that we have here because we can focus solely on this. And then since Sebille can create blood surfaces to get ourselves some Necromancer spells off cheaper, put some points in Necromancy. It's worth it. I also like to have a bit of Warfare here so we can start the fire damage, which you can see at the start. And Scoundrel actually kind of works out well here, so we can actually get some useful skills here. And for our talents, we want Elemental Affinity. This is a big one again, because we can create a blood surface, we can create a fire surface, and then we can cast whatever we want. The Hothead, since we're going to be casting spells, we want to have increased crit chance. Same thing, Savage Sortal Edge here, which will apply to all of our spells. The Pawn, increasing our action point, or giving us more movement is really good, especially because the couple points into the Scoundrel that we do have is going to give us even further movement speed. And then the Torturer, this allows us to put burn through any type of armor, which is really good, and also things like Ruptured Tendons and others. Now this build's weird, but we do have that same setup of Living on the Edge, Shackles of Pain, and Last Rites. But this is better here because we can do Flesh Sacrifice for 1 free action point, and then we get to 2 action point costs for Living on the Edge because of Elemental Affinity. So then we can do this, make it so that we can't be killed, and then we can use Shackles of Pain on an enemy with the free action point we got from Flesh Sacrifice, and then we can take the 500 damage that we got from Last Rites that we would apply to ourselves. It won't take us out, and it's going to damage the enemy and revive one of our teammates. So we got the revive combo as well, just easier. And because of that, I also like to have the Silencing Stare. Since we're going to be removing magic armor, this can silence all enemies in a cone in front of us, which is actually really nice if we can get down the magic armors. This is normally a spell I don't take on Necromancer's builds, but it fits well here. Now for our Scoundrel spells, I also like to have the Chloroform here because this is resisted by magical armor. We can put somebody to sleep, which is actually kind of crazy. We also got the Gag Order here, which is resisted by magic armor but can silence targets as well, similar to the Silencing Stare. And we also have the Sawtooth Knife. Now, if there's physical armor, this will pierce through it and deals piercing damage. And if the target has no physical armor, it will apply bleed so we can get some more blood surfaces down. And then Backlash, which is a bit of mobility. Now, these are our Scoundrel skills, so they're doing physical damage except for the magic armor, Gag Order, and Chloroform. So just be mindful of that they're going to be more so focused on utility. Same thing as for utility, having the Battle Stomp here. This is for targets with no physical armor. We can knock them down with both of these skills here, which is really nice. I also have a couple points in Aerotheurge, so we got Nether Swap here. Having Teleportation and Phoenix Dive is really nice because you can really control the battlefield this way. Uncanny Evasion to protect yourself or somebody else in your team. And then we have all these fire skills, Ignition obviously being one of the most powerful and the straightaway best thing to start off with to create those fire surfaces. We also got Peace of Mind here, which is going to be a nice buff to have. We also have the Haste, which is another great buff from Pyrokinetic. Fire Whip, which will blind targets. We then have the Laser Ray to be able to do damage in a line. And Supernova, which does a big explosion. You can crit on yourself, though. And then we also have Fireball with the 1 action point cost. Whenever there's a fire surface, it's really nice. I also like the Searing Daggers here to just be able to hit multiple targets and set up that burning for 3 turns. And since we have the Torturer talent, we can actually apply burning on 3 targets for 3 turns. Really good. But Flesh Sacrifice is just such a useful skill here. It sets up a lot of our other stuff. So now we're in combat. This target here has high physical armor. This one only has 200. So we can set up, we're not going to be typically going for physical armor here, but we were able to make this target bleed. And if I was confident we'd be able to take them out, yeah, that wasn't enough. Basically, if they had no physical armor, we'd want to use something battering ram on them. But that wasn't successful, so I'm going to use Phoenix Dive here because we have some characters that has fire spells, and then we can go right here to be able to make them free for them, which is nice. Now for our Hydrosophist, we can actually set up water here if we wanted to away from the fire surfaces, and then we can use the contamination to turn it into poison, or if we want to freeze and make an ice surface, we have the global cooling spell here. This is more so just, you want to split the fire and the water on 2 different settings, or 2 different sides of the battlefield here. We also got our very powerful things like Chain Lightning, which can do some crazy damage and then set up the shock surfaces so that we could get cheaper lightning spells. Now here we got our Summoner, so we can use the Elemental Totem on fire here, so it is going to get put into the load order there next, and it's going to shoot fire damage at somebody. And we also got Shock down, so we can do the Incarnate here, which is then a Incarnate champion with the shock or air damage. And it comes with the Electric Discharge, so it has a range option for damage, which is kind of nice. This is good because you can then go after a target that's going to have lower damage here, or lower magic armor, and try to remove it. And we're actually able to stun them, that's perfect. I typically prefer to be able to summon them right beside the enemy there so that they can actually get their attack off second. But they are stunned, they missed their turn. Now we can go ahead with, since there's a lot of water there, you can go and we can explode if we wanted to. That could cause some issues. I'm gonna go with a Worm Tremor here because we can actually crowd control these 2 in place. Worm Tremor is insane for Geomancer because with the Torture, you just lock them down, they take damage each turn. And then since we're in fire here, we do have cheaper things like Fireballs, so we just drop this down for 1 action point cost, pretty good. We'll apply burning on them. Now it's not worth it for me to go and try to remove any physical armor and try to crowd control that way with our build here. So this is another one where Fireball just wins out. It's a good damage spell, and if you can hit multiple targets, it's well worth it. We want to have fire in a place where our team can really benefit from it, and we're going for these targets here because they got lower health now, so we can go ahead with like the Fire Whip here, which is great against targets that you just want to be blinded so that they can't attack your team. It's perfect, it gives a little bit of a buff. And Haste is a nice one too. If you have a team member, I typically recommend putting the Haste on like our Geomancer Pyrokinetic. I like to do that as a buff, just to be able to provide a little bit extra damage. And you can also put like things like Peace of Mind on them as well. We do want Hail Strike to hit a target that doesn't have magical armor, so we have things like our Pressure Spike here, which can hit some pretty good damage, and our Elemental Totem, or our Elemental there, is immune to shock damage, which is really great because we can hit them with all of these attacks here. If we want to be crazy, we could drop the Closed Circuit there. We likely just want to use the Electrical Discharge here, though. Trying to remove the shield so that we can then drop an ice spell that could potentially crowd control them is nice to have. I guess I'll drop this here, but the Friendly Fire is all right. And again, our Summoner can then go apply that onto ice there. And then we're going to be using our Power Infusions on our Summon there to Incarnate, and then the Farsight Infusions. This just makes them a lot stronger, even though they are actually pretty strong just right off the rip. And then our Summon is going to shoot at a target and make them wet, which is great. And then we got our Geomancer back. Now, I'm buffed up with extra action points here, and I'm still in a Fire Surface, which is incredible. So you can blast away with some of our more powerful fire spells. You gotta watch out for friendly fire here, like Sebille's in the way here. I'm just gonna send it anyways. Yeah, that was probably not the wisest move. We took it a target, so yeah, got the, I took Executioner off of this build, but would have gotten that naturally. Now, we also got our Searing Daggers here, which is great. This target has no magic armor there, and this target I want dead, so I'm going to go after this one here, which is almost enough to take them out, and then I guess I can go with Spontaneous Combustion to finish them off, and then this target is going to be easily crowd controlled, so I guess I have 1 action point left, so I can go with, like, Fortify. Ignition's not a bad choice. It will do damage to that target there, so that could be good, but probably better to use Fortify there. And now it's our Incarnate's turn. What's crazy, we're up close, so we can use, like, Whirlwind here. The battering ram is crazy, but we have no movement speed. We could have knocked them down, which is crazy. But let's go with the attack here, which will do a bit of damage, and then we'll apply the, we can actually do a ranged incarnate attack, can't hit them, so yeah, probably would be better just to save that. And if it's a target you can silence, you can actually do this with this character here, but this is another one where we have a lot of pyro skills where we can just tuck away those daggers and do a bit of damage, and then hit with an ignition like this. I don't have a fire service here, so I can actually use this here to apply to the back line, and then walk into it with the pawn, take a little bit of fire damage, and if I have any fire spells, I can use them, but most of our poison spells here, which will set up a poison server, which is kind of funny because that'll further increase the fire, and we can actually heal ourselves with it too. And then we also have things like Impalement, which are pretty powerful. All the Geo spells are nice for the area of effect and a bit of extra damage, and the oil will get affected by the fire there, which is nice. And Fairly Odd Parents, the Incarnate took them out. I love the animations whenever they get electrocuted. We get, typically for our Summoner, they're going to be summoning in a totem every single turn, and we can honestly just skip our turn. Our 3 totems are just going to fire away at this target. They do some pretty great damage, and then we have our Incarnate here with its range attack as well to finish the job. So that is a very powerful magic build for a whole team in Divinity Original Sin 2. If you thought this video was useful, please hit the subscribe button below. I hope you guys all have a great day, and we'll catch y'all in the next one.